Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, Nedarim Samach Vav. We begin right on top at the Mishnah, Peischen, B'yamim Tovim U'B'Shabbosos. The Chacham or a Bezdin can use the Shabbos and Yom Tov card as a way to release one from his neder commitment. So he made a neder, I'm going to be off wine and meat from now until the rest of the year. 1 second, mister, don't you realize that Shabbos and Yom Tov are meant as days of Simcha and Oineg? You're going to be violating that chiyuv by abstaining from these foods. So in fact, we can use that as a Pesach, as a way to release him of his commitment. Now the question is, what happens to the entire neder? So Barishona, initially, until Rabbi Akiva's times, they would say like this. The Chachamim would say, well, Oysan Hayamim Mutarin. On Shabbos, Yom Tov, you can partake in meat and wine. It's not part of the neder. Ush'ar Kol Hayamim Asurin. However, the neder still stands with respect to the rest of the week. So the heter releases Shabbos, releases Yom Tov, but the rest of the neder still stands. Ad Shabbat Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came along and taught us based on a pasuk, a drasha. It's all or nothing. It's a package deal. Shan neder, shehutar miklolay, samagorias miktsasay, hutar kulei. Once part of the neder gets disrupted, it breaks up the entire neder. The Ran says, based on Yerushalmi, it's learned from the pasuk, kechol hayotzim pivyasa, the mashma davka b'shekulei kayam kol hayotzim pivyasa. If you're going to keep everything that you said, the whole package, the whole deal, otherwise it's over. You can't have a half a neder. Ketzad, let us have another example of this concept. Amar koinam she'eni neder l'kulchem. He gets up and says, I'm committing, by way of a neder, to refrain from having anah from all of you, this whole bunch of people here. It turns out one of them was his father or his brother, in which case the neder never applied to that person. It was a tos. It was a mistake to begin with. Hutur echad mehen. Suppose one of them becomes mutar. Hutru kulan. That disrupts the entire neder, which becomes null and void. But let's say he says it like this. Instead of referring to the bunch of the, as one group, as one package, he said, She'eni nana lezeh. I'm not going to have enough from Ruvain. Ulezeh, and from Shimon like Ruvain, and from Levi like Ruvain. So in this case, it's sort of separate entities. But it is somewhat, interdependent. Ruvain stands alone, but Sheni, Shimon depends on Ruvain. Levi depends on, the previous fellow. So it's sort of like a domino effect. In which case we say, Hutar Harishon, suppose Ruvain became mutar, that topples the whole domino arrangement. Hutru Kulan, everybody coming after him, who is dependent upon him, is mutar. Once the rug is pulled out, everything collapses. Hutar Achron, suppose the last one in line, the last one on the list became mutar. Mutar. Okay, so he's mutar. But everybody else still remains unaffected by his heter. In the brackets we have hutar ha'mitzai. Suppose the fellow in the middle of that domino arrangement became mutar. So again, it affects anybody behind him, but not before him. Heimenu ulamata mutar. Everything after him is mutar because it's dependent upon him. Heimenu ulamala asur. But anything before him remains asur. What if he totally separates the individuals, makes them into a separate nedarim? Sha'anin and elazeh carbon. Whatever I take from you is asur like a carbon, and he turns to Shimon, ulazeh carbon, etc., etc. They're totally independent of each other, in which case, tzrichen pesach. Luchal echad ve'echad. If he wants to release himself, he needs a pesach. He needs a way out. One per person. It's not a package. It's not a domino arrangement. It's a total separate neder per person. Here comes another example of neder shehutar miksasa yutar kulei. I'm going to be off wine. And he explains why. It's detrimental to my digestive system. No wine for me. So the people around him tell him, 1 second. You missed one very important fact. What about aged wine? That's very good for your intestines. Why would you keep off that? You're right, he says. I didn't realize. So that's called a toos. In which case, without even going to a chacham, he can have the yain miyushan, hutar b'miyushan, he can have the aged wine. Listen to this chiddush. That disrupts the entire neder. The heter is not applicable specifically to the miyushan on its own. Ella b'chala yain, he can now partake in any wine. In line with the concept of netar shehudar miktsasa yehutar kulei. Another example with onions. Koinam batzal shanitayim. No onions for me, and he explains why. Shabatzal ra'al lev, it's detrimental to one's heart. They tell him, what about the wild growing onion? That's good for the heart. Once again, hutar kufri, that makes a mutter in the kufri. It was never part of his neder, and it spreads to the entire neder. Everything becomes null and void. V'loy b'kufri about hutar. The heter isn't limited to the kufri. Ela b'chala b'tzolim. Rather, the entire neder against onions becomes mutter. Why? Because nedar shehudar miktsasai hutar kulay. In fact, it was a masa hayavi tiroy Rab Meir b'chal b'tzolim, a story involving Rab Meir, who permitted this fellow to partake in all types of onions. Now, the Mishnah, speaking about a neder directed at a group of people, in the last case we have a fellow who made separate nedarim, one per person. And how does the Mishnah package it? He says, Shaninena lezek karbon, a separate, expression for Ruvain, and then he turned to Shimon, ulezek karbon, a totally separate expression for Shimon. That separates them. That makes them independent of each other. Who is this shita who holds that in order to make them separate nedarim, one per individual, you have to really express, a totally separate, special expression of neder per person. Otherwise, they're considered one package. Who is the shita that requires that much? Mantana Amar Rab Shimoni. This is the famous Rab Shimon in Maseches Shvuos. So over there we're speaking about, a fellow who makes a shvua in denial of a monetary claim, and he has 5 people approaching him, you owe us money, and he says, no, I don't know you, or you, or you, or you. According to Chachamim, they're considered 5 separate, 5 people, 5 separate denials, which bring about 5 separate, penalties for this shvuas shav. According to Reb Shimon, it's considered one package, one denial, unless he actually expresses a totally separate expression of denial in a separate shvua. Shvua to you, shvua that I know you, shvua that I don't know you. Otherwise, it's considered one package. Our Mishnah, which indicates that in order to really separate, you have to say carbon to you, carbon to you, carbon to you. Otherwise, it's not considered separate nedarim. Rab Shimon he the Amar Acher Yamar Shvua Kachad ve'echad. That's Rab Shimon speaking. That you need to actually package it totally separate in order for them to be considered separate expressions. In the next case, we have a fellow trying to keep off wine because it's detrimental to his health. And they tell him, listen, you're right about fresh wine, but what about aged wine? That's good, actually good. So not only is it not bad, but it's actually beneficial to your for your health. Now the question is, why do they have to tell him that it's beneficial? Wouldn't it be enough to say the ein ra, that it's just not bad? You're concerned about your health? Well, this is not bad to your health. Why do we have to add the additional element that's actually beneficial? Why is that necessary? Answers the Gemara, you're right, it's not necessary, it's just added for elaboration. Number one, it's not bad, so that alone would allow you to have it. Number two, it's actually good, all the more reason why it's mutter. The same thing with the onion. It's bad, and we tell them, no, it's great. Why do you need it to be great? If a typically dein ra, it's enough that it's not bad for it to be mutter. Amar Abba, you're right. Number one, it's not bad, and number two, yafik tani, it's actually good. Katani, that's why the Mishnah just added it for added measure, but it wasn't really needed to be mated this fellow. Continues the Mishnah. We can apply the self-respect factor to release a person of his neder, as well as his children's good reputation. So, for instance, this fellow made a neder against his wife having enough from him, which compels him to divorce her. And then we approach him, we say, look, mister, do you realize the effect of what you're doing? Do you realize that by divorcing her, you're going to blacken your name, your children's name? And he turns around and he says, you know what? You have a good point. I regret what I said. Let me take her back. It's legal. It's valid. What's the chiddush? Well, perhaps we should be concerned that this sort of psychological pressure would pressure him to the point that he'll just acquiesce without really wanting to regret what he did. It won't really be a true expression of regret, not a genuine gauge of his true notions. The chiddush is yes. It's not overwhelming. It's not overly pressuring. It's just bringing him to realize the reality of what he's doing. And ultimately, it's his decision. He chooses to turn around and regret and reverse his neder. We're pleased to accept that from him. You can use the element of his own kavod or his kavod of his children to allow him to release himself of his neder. We tell him, when you made that neder against your wife, which compelled you to divorce her, if you would have known that after a while they start speaking about you, and they say, look, this is the way this person behaves. Look at his behavior. He divorces his wives. So that's pertaining to the person himself. You're going to blacken your name. This guy, can't control himself. Look, he goes crazy. He divorces his wives, and look at his kids. And look what they're going to say about your daughters. Daughters of a divorced mother. Must be something in the family. Must be something in the genes. What brought about their mother's divorce? She must have been exhibiting inappropriate behavior, and it's going to blacken the name of the family. It's going to ruin your kid's reputation. So after being presented with this grim picture, V'amar, he responds, you know what, you're right. Had I realized way back then that it's going to produce these results, I would never have made that neder. If he says that, he acknowledges regret, hareza mutar, we get him off the hook. What about if he says, koinem shani noises polonis kura, making a neder against marrying this and this person because she's ugly? Turns out that he was mistaken about the facts. She's actually pleasant looking. Or he says, I'm not going to marry her because she's dark-skinned, shechera. And he's wrong. Varehi levana. Turns out she's light-skinned. Or kutsara, she's short. Varehi arukan, she's really tall. Mutar ba. He's totally mutar. It was a mistake. It was another tos for which he doesn't even have to go to a chacham. This is not what he meant. Now, we're not speaking about a case that she was actually unpleasant looking and then she beautified herself and asis no on a change. That would be considered noilad, a brand new development. That's not considered a pesach. Or in a case of shechera v'nasis levana, she turned white, or ktsara v'nasaruka, she turned tall. Elosh another tos. Rather, we're speaking that he was mistaken to begin with about the facts. Umasa be'echad. It was actually a story about a fellow. Shenodar mibas achoisai hanoya. He made a neder against his niece. Some say he was actually married to her because she was not pleasant looking. V'yichnisua l'beis Rabbi Shmuel. They took her into Rabbi Shmuel's home, and he invested some effort. He tapped into the Chassan Kala fund, and he paid for an artist to come and help her out. V'yipua, and they beautified her. They taught her how to put herself together. We got her some accessories, and she looked like a totally different person than before. Rabbi Shmuel turns to this fellow, and he says, B'ni, my son, tell me, take a look. Mizuna Darta, was the neder against this person? Is she what you had in mind? Take a look at her. Amar lo, he says, no, of course not. La, that's not what I had in mind. I thought she was ugly looking. V'itira Rabbi Shmuel, and in fact Rabbi Shmuel used that as a heter on the neder. The Gemara will ask, actually, this is a noilad. It was a change. It was a development. And the Gemara will discuss that in a minute. So Rabbi Shmuel would exert effort, perhaps based on the story. He invested himself into this topic. He would help Jewish women improve on their looks. At that point, Rabbi Shmuel broke down crying and he said, V'amar, Jewish girls are really pleasant looking. And rather poverty makes them look disheveled and unkempt, and it covers over their real beauty. In fact, when Rabbi Shmuel was nifter, Jewish women would lament and say, and they would call out, B'nois Yisrael, Jewish women, al Rabbi Shmuel b'chena, you should break out in B'chi, on account of Rabbi Shmuel's absence. He who would stand to our side, V'cheinu Omer b'Shaul, likewise it says by Shaul HaMelech, who likewise invested in beautifying B'nai Yisrael. It says the pasuk B'nai Yisrael al Shaul b'chena, everybody should break down crying and lament his absence. Shaul HaMelech, who would, the pasuk continues, Hamal b'Shchem shani Madonim Hamala Adi Zav al Vushchen, who would procure clothing and jewelry for Jewish women. Now we have a kasha, because the Mishnah says, when he says a neder against plainis chura, he's mutter if it turns out that he was mistaken in the facts. But if there was a change, if she became no after the neder, that doesn't help you. And then we go ahead and bring a story which proves exactly the opposite. Rabbi Shmuel went and he invested effort and beautified her, and that was enough to be matter the neder. It wasn't a pre-existing situation. It was a changed situation. Masa, Lister, you bring a story to contradict your earlier notion. First you say, Noilad is not acceptable. Then Noilad does work. In fact, the Mishnah is meant to be learned as though it's missing some words. Tanakama holds, the only way it's mutter is if, in fact, he was off on the details at the time of the neder. But if later on, she improved on her looks, it doesn't help you. Rabbi Shmuel Omer afilu chura v'nasis na. He disagrees. Even if there was an improvement later on, shchora v'nasis levana, ktsara v'nasis aruka, it works. He holds that noilad is an acceptable Pesach in line with Rabbi Lezer Shita, the beginning of the Mesach, of the Perek. In fact, there was a story that he followed through on this heter. Maaseh be'echad, shenadar hanam basachoisai, v'chnisol v'ser b'shmo, v'yipuah v'chulu, and he was matir. The Rosh actually seems to learn differently. Rabbi Shmuel is not going with Shita Rabbi Lezer that every noilad is mutter. Dafka over here he says, I'll just read the words inside the Savar. It's a specific allowance when it comes to beautification, because he says the fact that you can apply makeup, you can put yourself together, that's not called a change. That's a riot. She was never really ugly looking. It's all relative. It's in the eye of the beholder, and that's not called noilad. And apparently, according to the Rosh, Rabbi Shmuel is only disagreeing with this aspect of the Mishnah. But in terms of the other, physical features like short and dark skin, that it wouldn't apply to that case. That would be considered a noilad if it happened later. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, how exactly did Rabbi Shmuel accomplish his feat? Sheinte teves ha'isala. This Isha had a substitute tooth which was not pleasant looking. V'asa Rabbi Shmuel changed his zov, and he upgraded it to a gold tooth mishaloi out of his own pocket, which improved on her looks. Kishach of Rabbi Shmuel. When Rabbi Shmuel passed away, Pasach Aleya Usavdana, this Bal Masped, this eulogizer, opened up his hesped as follows: Hachi, B'nai Yisrael, Jewish girls, al Rabbi Shmuel b'chena, cry out about Rabbi Shmuel's departure. Hamal bishchen, who would enclothe you with clothing and jewelry. This is basically a quote of that pasuk by Shaul HaMelech, which was used by David HaMelech to be maspin him. So according to some Mefarshim, Rabbi Shmuel was looking after a married couple's welfare. They were already married, and he was trying to restore harmony. And on that topic, we're going to find several instances where various Chachamim would forego their own honor in order to restore peace and harmony in a Jewish home. His fellow turns to his wife, you may not benefit from me at all. Apparently she wasn't the greatest cook. He says, you know what? I'm making a neder against you unless you allow Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the great Chachamim, to sample some of your, delicacies. Unless you offer some of your cooking, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. So what happened? Rabbi Yehuda told him. When Rabbi Yehuda was presented with her delicacies, he took part. Omar, he said like this: I'm allowed to do it, even though it contravenes my kavod and kavod Torah. Hashem wants it so, for the sake of shalom bayis, which is paramount. Omar, he said, kal v'chomer. We can learn by the way of a kal v'chomer, this is mutter. If, in order to restore peace and harmony between a husband and wife, Omra Torah, Shmi shenichta bikdusha, yimocha alamayim, hama'arurim besafik. We find that the Torah allows us, instructs us to erase his name, his parsha, into that water, to the mayim ha'arurim, which an isha who deviates will drink. Why? For the sake of shalom bayis. And even though it's just misafik, we don't know if it's going to achieve the results that we're looking for. Maybe she'll explode, if in fact she deviated. But on account of that suffix that it might actually prove her innocence, Hashem allows us to be moiche shemoy. Says Rabbi Yehuda about himself, certainly by me, it is allowed and the way to go. In fact, there was a story I read about a Sfardish Chacham many years ago, and he was sitting in Matzah Shabbos, and his wife asked him, what would you like for Mlava Malka? And he said, Majedra. This was a Sephardi milchig delicacy, which takes actually hours. It's like a chont. It takes a lot of preparation. And he was joking. She said, "Really? No, I was just joking. You asked me what I want, so I told you, but I wasn't serious. I'll be okay with anything." Okay, that was just a joke. And guess what? A couple of minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and a woman comes up and she says to the Rav, I'm employed as a cook in a certain Jewish home, and my hostess, my boss, asked me to cook this Mejedra dish, and I mistakenly cooked it in a fleischiger pot, and my boss is fuming at me. What should we do? Is it what's the status of this? So the Rav took her in, and he asked her some questions, Ben Yaimai, and this and that. And he said it's okay. Okay, she was very thankful. She went back home. A little while later, she's back knocking on the door, and she says, "Look, my hostess doesn't believe me. She thinks that you did it just to save me my honor, my grace, to preserve my job, but it's not really kosher. And the only way she'll believe that it's really kosher is if, in fact, you partake in this food." So the Rav says, "Sure, no problem." He took off a little Mejedra, and he had it in their presence, and everything was restored back to normal. So the Rebbitzin remarked to the Chacham, she says, I'm amazed that just, you made an offhanded comment when I asked you what you like from Lava Malka. You said a Mejedra, and look what happened. Look what Hashem provided you with, exactly as per your wish. Tzaddik Geiser, V'Kadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim. So here, Rabbi Yehuda took part in her delicacies in order to restore their shalom bayis. But Reb Shimon refused. Reb Shimon loy time. He didn't want to taste the thing. He felt it was not befitting for kavod Torah. Amar, he said, "I'm not going to cooperate with this mean fellow." Yamusu kol bnei alman. He gave him a klala. He says, a person who makes Nedarim and doesn't keep them, the einish is that he died, his kids are affected, so he should die, she should be an almana, and the kids should die. Val Yazuz Shimon Rumkamim, but Shimon, referring to himself, does not budge from his place. He felt it was not proper to cooperate with this type of unreasonable, fellow. V'oid, another reason. Ki heiche de lisargli leminder. He's afraid that you're going to cooperate. It's just going to open up a Pandora's box, just going to create an avalanche of people getting involved in these sillinesses. So he put his foot down. I'm not going to cooperate, and hopefully this will discourage such acts in the future. So we see an interesting difference of opinion on how to react. Do we sacrifice Kavod Torah for Shalom Bayis, or according to Rabbi Shimon, he felt in this case it was not the right thing to do. Here comes another story, a similar story. How the Amr Lidvisu, this fellow turns to his wife, Koinam She'iyat Nanesli. You can't have any enough from me until Acha Taroiki Boy Barabon Shimon Gamliel. Until you spit at the big tzaddik of Shimon Gamliel. Okay? Asas, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, allowed this Isha to come v'rakak al-vushe and spit on his beged. And this way, he was mater the Isha. You fulfilled your husband's wishes. You spat at me. That's it. Amali Rav Acha mediftul Ravina. So Rav Acha asks Ravina. She didn't really, keep the deal. He meant spit in his face. She cut corners. She spit on his beged. Why is that enough to be mater the neder? Well, this mean husband was a lusa kamachavan. He meant to embarrass the tzaddik. That's what he meant. Spit in his face. This doesn't really do it. Amali Ravina responded, it is considered as a lusa. Merak almani. The Rav Shimon Gamliel zilusa rapsi. Spitting on the beggar of a big tzaddik, a big chacham, a big nasi, like Rav Shimon Gamliel, is tantamount to spitting in another person's face. It's a great shame, a great embarrassment. Zilus Rapsi, and is considered a kiyum of the neder, which allows her to go home, back to her husband. Ahud Amalul Dvisu. Person turns to his wife, who apparently was not too pleasant looking, and he says, Koinam, I'm making you usher to me by way of a neder. Koinam Shiat Nenesli, Achetari, unless you show mum, something. Some small, anything nice about you, any positive element about you. Mu'um yafish shebeich. Unless you show that, so that's the condition. You're also to me unless you can find something nice about yourself, which you will show to Bishmal Rabbi Yesi. So she came to Bishmal, who was now going to expend a great deal of effort to try to, extract them of this issue, to try to restore peace and harmony. He says, look, Talmidim, could you go look into the situation? Maybe you can find something nice about her. What about her head? Is her head nice? They said, sorry, Rebbe, Sgalgal, it's round and not too pleasant looking. Next try, Shema Sa'orana, what about her hair? Well, that's also not too great. They appear like bundles of flax. Next try, he asks, Shema Inea noise, what about her eyes? Perhaps they're nice. No, they answer true to saying they're round. Shema Iznea noise, what about her ears? Kfula saying doubled over. Shema Choytmano, what about her nose? Bolamu, it's closed up, it's ugly looking. Shema Sifsasea noise, what about her lips? Maybe they're pleasant looking. Avay saying they're actually thick. Shema Tzavar no, what about her neck? Shakatu, it's short. Shema Kroisa no, what about her belly? Tzavahu, bloated. Shema Raglea noise, what about her feet? Ruchavish Shkil Avza, they're wide like a duck. Okay, he's pretty down to the wire, nothing left to ask. One last try. Shema, what about Shmona? Maybe she has a nice, pleasant name? Well, that also not Lichluch Lishma. Lichluchis means dirt. She's called Lichluchis. So we're stuck. So Bishma, with his Chachma, turned lemons into lemonade. He says just the opposite. Wow, this is a positive element. Her name really reflects her true nature. She's transparent, through and through. She's not pretending. Her name describes herself. Wow, that's amazing. That's something so unusual. That's something nice. Amar lehen, it is proper and appropriate that the fact that they call lachluchas, because she's filled with these blemishes, and that was enough to make her mutter. So he found some positive element in the Isha and sent her back home. One final story about a fellow from Bavel, where they apparently used different dialect in Eretz Yisrael, and created some communication problems between himself and his wife, who was Israeli. Hauba Bavel, this fellow from Bavel, the Sog Yisrael, went up to Eretz Yisrael, and he married there. Nasavitza, he married a local, whose dialect was slightly different than his, which created confusion. Amar he tells her, Bishili li trei tilfi, according to the Rosh, trei tilafchen. Tilafchen are beans. Could you cook for me, a couple of beans? She took him literally. She cooked him 2 beans. But she late straight lafchi, 2 beans, rasach, he got all mad. Rasach Allah. Okay, now she learned her lesson. Lamacha, the next day, he tells him, Shili greva. You know what? He was careful. He says, greva is like a large measure. Could you make for me a big pot of beans? This time she took him literally. She made them this huge pot, enough for an army. B'shili greva. Okay, now he's really getting agitated. Amrla, he tells us, Zili aisili trei butzini. Could you get me 2 melons? So in her language, butzini were candles. Azlas v'aisili trei shragi. She brought him 2 candles. And this time he blew it. Amrla, he tells us, Zili, go, Tavri Yosain, break them apart, Al Reisha the Bava at the top of the doorway. And she thought Bava means the tzaddik Bava ben Buta. Break it on the head of Bava ben Buta. So as a compliant Tamimistic wife, she followed his instructions. Hava Yosef Bava ben Buta Bava. So the tzaddik Bava ben Buta was sitting at the doorway. The Kodon Dina, he was engaged in his din Torah. She walked over, Azlas, V'tavras Yosain Al Reisha. She walked over and broke the candles over his head. Amrlas, he looked up in surprise. He said, what's going on? Why are you hitting me? Ma'adein da'adas, why are you doing this? Amrlas, she says, look, my husband instructed me. Kach tzivani bali, I'm just doing his ratzon. Amar, Bava Mabuta was so impressed. You know, the Medrash, Tonad Ve'el Rabbah, says, why was Yoel Eisha's Chaver Akeni so zoiche to rescue Klal Yisrael from Sisra? She was an Isha Kshera. She was Oysa Ritzoin Baila, and the Medrash says, Mikan Amr, we learn from here. What is the Ika Tafkid of an Isha? Ein Isha Kshera, Ella Ha'oysa Ritzoin Baila. What is considered an Isha Kshera? She listens to her husband. The silliest husband, the most ridiculous request, she follows through. Amar, he tells her, I'm impressed with you. At Asas Ritzoin Balach. You fulfilled the ratzon of your husband, despite the fact that it was certainly uncomfortable for you to do so. I'll give you a bracha. Hamakam yoytzim imeich shnei banim ki baba ben Buta Hashem. Should give you a bracha. You should have 2 sons, tzaddikim, like Bava ben Buta. Hadron Allah Rabbi Lazar. So he didn't take offense. He was Meser Nefesh for Shalom Bayis. He turned around and gave her a bracha and gave her a compliment, encouraged her to continue on that path. Be a iksha kshera iser ritzayin ba'al. Okay, so we learned about using Shabbos and Yantav as a Pesach. According to Rabbi Kiva, once part of a neder becomes batel, the whole package deal is over. We have several variations of Nedarim against a group of people. Sometimes it's considered a package, sometimes it's individualized, depending on how we said it. The idea of neder shabatel miktsasa batel makuli we have by the yain, by the batel. We can use kavod atzma, self-respect and family reputation, to discourage a person from a neder. We learned about Rabbi Shmuel Shita regarding yipui of an isha. That's something that can be used for heter. And we find several stories of chachamim who sacrificed their own kavod, their own honor. They're willing to make a nefesh for the sake of shalom bayis. Hadron Allah Rabbi Lazar. All the best to you, and may we always have much shalom va'achva v'reis in our families.